Okay, it looked like we are live. Sergeant, can you check and make sure that we are in the correct Zoom room?
Live stream is good.
Thank you. Sergeant, can you start your recordings?
PC recording is up.
Thank you. Good morning and welcome to the New York City Council remote hearing for the fiscal year 2023 executive budget hearing on the Committee on Finance together with the Committee on Fire and Emergency Management. At this time, will all panelists please turn on your videos? Thank you. To minimize disruption, please place all electronic devices to vibrate or silent mode. Thank you for your kind cooperation. Chair, we are ready to begin.
Thank you, Sergeant. Good morning and welcome to the first executive budget hearing of this legislative session. My name is Justin Brannon. I have the privilege of chairing the Committee on Finance, and I'm pleased to be joined by my colleague, fellow chair, Councilmember Arriola, chair of the Committee on Fire and Emergency Management. I want to extend a welcome to the administration. Thank you for being here, Acting Commissioner Kavanaugh and your team, and we look forward to hearing your testimony. I also want to take a moment to extend my gratitude to the entire Council Finance Division, especially John Russell and Jack Kern, for their preparation for today's hearing. And finally, my senior advisor, John Yedden, and all support staff behind the scenes for making this virtual hearing possible today. This legislative body, the City Council, the co-equal branch of government, plays an important role in the budget process by advocating for the needs of New Yorkers. We start the process back in March, where we examine the mayor's preliminary budget of $98.5 billion for fiscal 23. Through a series of hearings, this committee and others closely examined the preliminary budget and sought answers to questions from this administration to ensure that not only is the budget balanced, but more importantly, that it is fair and equitable to all New Yorkers. Today, we begin the process of examining the mayor's executive budget, and we begin with the fire department. The fiscal 23 executive budget allocates $2.28 billion, a $162 million decrease compared to the current FY22 budget. We discussed some major issues following release of the preliminary budget, including pay parity for EMS members, serious fires reaching the second alarm or higher, and increased reporting in the MMR, the Be Heard program, the Behavioral Health Emergency Response Division program, and the FDNY's approach to the issue of the fifth firefighter, among many other things. I look forward to hearing from the administration today on how they'll be addressing these topics that we raised in the preliminary budget oversight hearings, as well as other issues in the executive budget as they pertain to the FDNY. What I said at our preliminary budget hearing in March still holds true. New Yorkers work hard and pay a tremendous amount of taxes, and therefore they rightfully expect to see a tangible return on their investment. And it's our imperative that our city delivers for all the hardworking New Yorkers who have felt overlooked, ignored, and shut out of their government in the past. If we can ensure we are spending wisely, safeguarding our financial future, and fortifying the city's social safety net for our most vulnerable, then we can deliver a budget and recovery truly for everyone. I want to now turn to my co-chair for this hearing and chair of the Fire and Emergency Management Committee for Joanne Arriola for her opening statement. And go ahead when you're ready.
Thank you, Chair. Good morning, and again, welcome to the fiscal 2023 executive budget hearing for the Fire Department of New York. My name is Joanne Arriola, and I'm the chair of Fire and Emergency Management Committee. Today, we will review the Fire Department's fiscal 2023 budget to understand how it addresses the needs of all New Yorkers. I would like to begin by acknowledging the tragic loss of life of firefighter Timothy Klein, a 6-year veteran of the department. Timothy came from a fire department family. His service continues his family's legacy. He is also a constituent of mine, and we are thankful for his bravery as we continue to pray for his family, his friends, and his fellow FDNY members during this difficult time. Today, we're here to discuss the fire department's fiscal 2023 executive budget, which is $2.28 billion with 17,489 positions. The fiscal 2023 executive budget has undergone some large changes, increasing $116 million since adoption. The department has had 3 new needs in fiscal 2022, totaling $50 million, 4 new needs in fiscal 2023 that increased the budget by $47 million. All new needs are entirely city funded. The fire department's fiscal 2022 to 26 capital commitment plan totals $1.2 billion and supports 305 distinct projects. Following a productive conversation around the preliminary budget and some significant budgetary changes to the department in the past 2 plans, I'm looking forward to discussing the fire department's priorities, needs, and recent actions. The department has added funding for Behavioral Health Emergency Assistant Response Division, also known as BHERD, over time, and the committee and myself would like to understand some of these changes. We would also like to discuss the 5th firefighter, ion lithium batteries, fire inspectors, diversity, recruitment, and more. I am excited that we will accomplish a lot over this term and look to build on previous hearings we have had in the past few months, like outdoor gas fueling, legislation following the Twin Parks fire, and as usual, the safety of FDNY members. I would like to thank our committee staff for their hard work, financial analyst Jack Kern, unit head John Russell, committee counsel Josh Kingsley, political analyst Will Hongash, and my incredible chief of staff, Phyllis Incerillo. I would like to welcome and thank Acting Commissioner Kavanaugh and our firefighters, EMTs, paramedics, and the department's civilian staff for the work that they do. I'm looking forward to hearing from the acting commissioner, and I will now turn it back to committee counsel.
Thank you, Co-Chair. Council, I just want to acknowledge that the members we've been joined by before you get into swearing everyone in. So we've been joined today by council members Moya, Farias, Brooks Powers, Yeager, Osei, Brewer, Schulman, Carr, Holden, Velasquez, and Lewis. And as more people join, if they do, we will acknowledge them. Thank you again, Chair Ariel. I'll now turn to our committee counsel to go over procedures and swear in our administration witnesses.
Thank you, chairs. Good morning and welcome, everyone. My name is Malcolm Buterhorn, and I am counsel to the Finance Committee. Unlike in past, council members and members of the mayoral administration will have the ability to mute and unmute themselves. When not speaking, we ask that you please remember to mute yourself. If people forget to do so and I hear background noise, I will go ahead and mute you myself. Council members who have questions for the administration should use the raise hand function in Zoom. You will be called on in the order with which you raised your hand after both chairs have concluded their questions. Council members' questions will be limited to 5 minutes. And please note, for the purposes of this virtual hearing, we will not be allowing a second round. The following members of the administration will testify and/or answer questions: Acting Commissioner Laura Kavanaugh, Acting Chief of the Department John Hodgins, Deputy Chief of EMS Jonathan Pastilli, and Deputy Commissioner of Budget and Finance Lizette Christoph. I will first read the oath, and after I will call on each member from the administration individually to respond. Do you affirm to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth before this committee, and to respond honestly to council member questions? Commissioner Kavanaugh?
I do.
Chief Hodgins?
I do.
Deputy Chief Pastilli?
I do.
And Deputy Commissioner Christoph?
I do.
Thank you. Commissioner Kavanaugh, you may begin when ready.
Thank you. Good morning, Chair Ariola, Chair Brannon, and all the council members present. My name is Laura Kavanaugh, and I am the Acting Commissioner of the New York City Fire Department. I am joined today by John Hodgins, the Acting Chief of Department for FDNY, Jonathan Pastilli, the Assistant Chief of EMS, and Lizette Christoph, Deputy Commissioner for Budget and Finance. Thank you for the opportunity to speak with you about the Mayor's executive budget and its impact on the fire department. I'd like to begin my testimony by acknowledging the passing of firefighter Timothy Klein, who died 12 days ago as he battled a fire in a Brooklyn home. Tragically, that fire also claimed the life of Carlos Richards, a 21-year-old resident of the home. Firefighter Klein grew up in Queens, and his family has a proud history of serving in the FDNY. 6.5 years ago, he became a firefighter, following in the footsteps of his father, uncles, and cousins. He was passionate about his work, and members he served with say that he loved to volunteer his time to improve the lives of others, and that he never missed a chance to help. That's what he was doing in his final moments, braving danger to help others. He dedicated his life to service, spending his free time with a charitable organization that performed construction to make homes more accessible. He completed his most recent project only a week before his death, building a ramp at a residence to make life easier for a young man with cerebral palsy. The FDNY family is mourning the loss of firefighter Klein, but his legacy will live on as we honor his example by dedicating ourselves to helping others and serving the community. The Mayor's executive budget for fiscal 2023 provides steady support for the fire department. We are grateful to Mayor Adams for his focus on public safety and his support of FDNY. The fiscal year 2023 budget for the fire department is approximately $2.3 billion. This reflects $137 million in additional funding provided as part of the executive budget, the largest component of which is a transfer from the labor reserve of $83 million for settled labor contracts. The next largest addition of expense funding is $37 million for the Behavioral Health Emergency Assistance Response Division, or BHERD program. BHERD reflects the city's new approach to individuals experiencing a mental health emergency. In this program, EMS members work alongside colleagues from H&H in coordination with the Mayor's Office of Community Mental Health to provide care and coordinate support for patients presenting with mental health and substance abuse challenges. The responses prioritize de-escalation and providing health-centered responses to mental health emergencies. The money provided for in the executive budget funds is a continuation of the current pilot program, as well as an expansion into additional neighborhoods, and most significantly, mental health training for all members of EMS and the related collectively bargained differential. The executive budget also provides funding for life safety equipment and supplies in FY23 and the out years. That amount, $4.4 million a year, will go towards general unit price increases, plus equipment such as self-contained breathing apparatus face pieces. The executive budget also contains money for department needs associated with IT projects, money for leases of FDNY facilities, and upward adjustments to energy and fuel costs. In addition, the budget provides for several capital new needs. The largest capital item is $135 million for apparatus floor replacements. Our firehouses are quite old, and this money will allow us to address critical needs. The fire department also received capital funding for other needs, such as the establishment of a data center at PSAC 2 in the Bronx, the replacement of chillers at 2 of our communications offices, ladder refurbishments, and funding to bridge shortfalls at EMS Station 17 and Engine Company 268. Over the last few months, the fire department has experienced some very difficult days. The loss of firefighter Klein is the latest reminder of the dangers that FDNY firefighters and EMS members face every time they answer a call. They do so day in and day out, despite the risk to themselves, because their mission is to protect the people of New York City, and they have never let our city down. That work is possible because of the support the department receives from Mayor Adams and from the City Council. It is also the result of our extensive interaction with members of the community through multilingual fire safety education events, CPR demonstrations, and a wide assortment of diverse public safety messaging. We are very appreciative of the resources that the fire department is receiving in the mayor's executive budget. With this support, the department will continue our mission, learning from difficult days and providing the highest level of service possible to the people of New York City. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Kavanaugh. Just want to acknowledge we've also been joined by Council members Barron and Sanchez. Okay. But before we begin, the committee may not get to all of the questions today, so you might not have responses to everything. So we'll make sure we send a follow-up letter for all the unanswered questions. Just important for us to get everything on the record as we get into negotiations. So I want to jump into something that's very near and dear to my heart, and certainly to Chair Ariola, the fifth firefighter. So we know that the fifth firefighter is currently a negotiated piece of the UFA contract, and approximately 20 of the 197 engine companies have the fifth firefighter. I've long been an advocate for the fifth firefighter. I've been in favor of restoring the fifth firefighter to all engines. We can't do that legislatively because of collective bargaining, which we understand. But I just want to dig into this a little bit. In the select engines where there is a fifth firefighter, has the FDNY seen that those engines are able to get the first hose out faster than the engines with 4 firefighters?
I just want to recognize you have been a great advocate on this, and we appreciate that over the years. We do have the fifth firefighter right now, and as you mentioned, it is due to collective bargaining. I will pass it over to Chief Hodgins to speak to what's currently happening with the 20 that we have in those engines.
Good morning. The 20 five firefighter engines that are staffed today were chosen because of the unique response areas that they're in. There's many different criteria, one being what we call H-type building, which is a large non-fireproof multiple dwelling that sometimes requires the stretch of the hose line is particularly difficult. And that extra hand may come in handy for sure at a building like that. And then sometimes if the engine company is located in an area where they may operate alone for a period due to their geographical location. Because of that, the time difference is probably absorbed in comparison to the rest of the city. The way we operate with the 4 firefighters is a second engine company arrives and assists immediately. Usually in most areas, that's pretty not a significant amount of time. And we've been doing this since 1990. And this is our SOP now. And we really, the fifth firefighter in those areas does help out. But in the rest of the city, I don't think it'd be a significant difference in the time to stretch the hose line.
Okay, I appreciate that. So according to FDNY, it would cost approximately $81 million in expense funding, or $167 million, including fringe to staff the remaining 173 engines with a fifth firefighter. And it would require 865 new firefighters to fully staff as the fifth firefighter. So as we've stated here, although this is a negotiated piece with the UFA, do we have an idea of how long it would take to hire 865 new firefighters?
I don't think we could give you a date right now. That's something we could take back and look at. But as you know, due to COVID, we are under headcount in our firefighter rank right now. And so we need to hire up to the current headcount before we could consider what it would take to hire above headcount at that rate. So I do think it would take a little bit of time, due to the catching up we need to do post-COVID. But we could circle back to you on, what a timeline might be for something like that.
Okay, and just to get on the record, does the FDNY support the continued expansion of the fifth firefighter, or would the department prefer to only have the 20 additional firehouses with the fifth firefighter?
I think the matter of the fifth firefighter is really an operational one. And so I think it's something that we will bring up in our next round of collective bargaining to talk about whether or not there's additional flexibility that could be built in so that we can use the fifth firefighter where and when it is needed operationally.
So right now, I've introduced so many different rezos on this, I can't keep up, right? But because it's all we can do. But right now, is there what would trigger? I know there have been situations where extreme weather or whatever it may be, where it triggers a fifth firefighter on all engines. Right now, what are those situations where you would say, okay, all engines have to have a fifth firefighter?
Yeah, you're correct that certainly it's at our discretion. So, it could be anything that the chief determines he needs that, but certainly any major weather event is one where we consider that, and the chief can add to that.
Yeah, so where the fifth firefighter comes in very, where it's utilized effectively is with a deep snowstorm, anything over 8 inches, something like that. Because, you're physically stretching a hose line. If there's snow on the ground, it's more difficult. So those extra hands come in handy. And if we had a chance of severe flooding, we might have the fifth firefighter due to maybe delayed response. Anything that we feel there would be a delayed response would create a delayed response, would trigger the fifth firefighter.
Okay. I want to get into the Be Heard program, the Behavioral Health Emergency Response Division. Be Heard program has been operated by H&H, New York Health and Hospitals, and the FDNY since June of last year, with the goal of addressing mental health crises as a public health issue, not as a public safety issue. And the program has expanded from 5 precincts to 9 in November 2021 and March 2022, including areas of Northern Manhattan and the South Bronx. The fiscal 23 executive plan included $55 million for the entire program in FY23, $37 million of which would support the FDNY's role in the program, compared to the $26.6 million in the FY22 budget. So when it comes to Be Heard, has the department viewed this program as successful since it began?
We do. We see that people are, that these situations are more likely to be just de-escalated, and that the patients are more likely to get the exact form of long-term mental health care that they're needed, and less likely to come back into the system as a result. So it is quite successful from our point of view.
And does the department envision this program expanding citywide?
Yeah, I think, like anything, we're studying it carefully to make sure it continues to be effective. But I think if it is effective, that is the ultimate goal.
Okay, and are there conclusions from the pilot program that led to an increase in funding for FY23?
Yeah, I think it's exactly what I said, which is that, we saw that there were positive outcomes, the ones we were looking for with the patients in the pilot. And so the administration decided to expand the pilot. And those expansions are really based on where we see there's the most need for this call type.
Okay. Okay, I want to, I'm sure my colleagues will have more questions about that, but I don't want to ask everything. But I do want to ask something that is very important to the speaker, to myself, to many members of the council, and of course to our chair of this committee. Last summer, the OLR and Local 2507 came to an agreement that raised wages for their members, the EMS workers. Contract followed previous precedent, and the union stated the city categorically refused to provide pay parity or anything that approximated pay parity for EMS first responders in the FDNY. So, Commissioner, you have previously stated that this is something you personally care about, which is very meaningful and significant. However, like the fifth firefighter, it's a matter of collective bargaining. So it's not something that the FDNY can do much about, unfortunately. However, at the preliminary budget hearing, it was stated that you were extensively involved in the negotiations last summer. And I believe the speaker questioned you on this issue at an oversight hearing on pay parity back in 2019. I want to quote something that the speaker said at that time, that the issue of pay disparity, especially for a majority Black and brown women workforce, is a far-reaching issue that goes way beyond the table. It goes into families, it goes into neighborhoods, it goes into perception, it goes into conversation, and pay equity shouldn't be something that's negotiable or negotiated. She went on to say it's imperative and incumbent on everyone that's sitting around, everyone that has the authority, the power, and the voice to make that happen. So, now that you're acting commissioner of the FDNY and you have the power that the speaker spoke of, how can you amplify the pervasive pay inequity that has continued to affect the EMS workers, the majority of which who are Black and brown women in your department?
So I agree with the speaker's sentiments. That is exactly why I was intimately involved with the labor relations negotiations last year, which is unusual, but I thought was important. At the end of the day, though, this is still collectively bargained. I do not have the power to make this change myself, although I wish that I did, but I do think it's important that the leaders of the organization, show how important this is to us by sitting at the table at negotiations, because I do think that shows, even though we may not have the power ourselves to make the change, that it's a critical long-term priority of the department. And that contract did result in a historic raise for EMS, including a 6% differential for the BHERD program and the mental health work that we were talking about. So, I hear the frustrations of our members. They've been waiting a long time for this, and it's hard to hear that it's going to, take more time. But that being said, I think it shows certainly our commitment and my commitment to getting there eventually by seeing that historic raise come out of that contract. And certainly we will be sitting down again soon for another round of contract negotiations. And I will be there myself again, and we'll continue to advocate for this. And, I'm always willing to sit down with the council and think of, other outside of the box ways to solve this problem. I think what we all are frustrated with is that this is a problem that none of us created. EMS workers started categorized as transportation workers many, many years ago. And that fundamental inequity is what has, sort of led to this point now, where we are continuing to have to put in a lot of work and be constrained by some of the collective bargaining processes. But that being said, I remain as committed as I was last year, and I think you'll see that same level of time and effort and commitment on my part to get us where we need to be.
Yeah, it's certainly frustrating. I mean, we're creating what I like to call a second class of first responders, right? When someone calls 911 and they ask, do you need police, fire, or medical? They're all on the same level, except when payday comes. We appreciate that this has become more of a mainstream concern and more people are talking about it. Certainly, then candidate for mayor, Eric Adams, he and I stood shoulder to shoulder with these unions and called for pay parity. So you certainly have the support of the mayor. I hope that where there's a will, there's a way, and we can actually we can get this done. Certainly through COVID, if we didn't think that the EMS workers at these street doctors were performing everyday miracles, certainly through COVID, when they were responding to 7,000 911 calls on a good day, I think the time has come for pay parity. You have the full support of the council. Whatever we can do, to help here, we want to do, and that's on behalf of the speaker, on behalf of everybody in this hearing today. So I don't want to be here, next summer talking about this. I think that's really it, right? I think it took us a while to get this into the bloodstream. Now it's there, but we really need to do something about it.
I agree.
So, Yeah, all right. So I want to move along. So I want to hand it over to my co-chair, but I want to talk a little bit about diversity and recruitment. Before I do that, I want to acknowledge we've been joined by Deputy Speaker Ayala and Councilmember Feliz. So diversity and recruitment. Just to understand the FDNY's successful steps and what it will do to improve, the department has been investing in diverse recruiting. In 2018, 9% of firefighters were Black, 13% were Hispanic. Now the proportions have slightly changed. 10% of the 8,100 firefighters identifying as Black and 16% as Hispanic. In 2015, Council passed Local Law 49 in an effort to receive reporting on the racial and gender makeup of applicants for the FDNY. It requires the FDNY to submit an annual update every March. However, this information has not been submitted since FY20. Don't know why that is. Hopefully we can figure that out. So in order to view additional details about the FDNY's current makeup, the council has placed a term and condition in the fire department's budget for the past 3 years, and the FDNY has shared the annual demographic information since FY19. So, Commissioner, can the department commit to submitting the required reporting to comply with Local Law 49?
Absolutely. I'm not sure why it wasn't uploaded, although I will say that a number of staff were redeployed during COVID. So given the year that you mentioned, I assume that's why. Right after this hearing, I'll double back to that team and make sure that they know that they need to upload this. It's, diversity is extraordinarily important to me, as you know, and certainly that report is something that we can commit to uploading. So we'll take care of that.
Okay. And just because we haven't received the updates through the Local Law 49, can you tell us what's the status of diversity and recruitment? How much has the FDNY spent annually on recruiting diverse applicants?
So recruiting for the FDNY is cyclical. The test is given every 4 years. So what we spend in those recruitment years, as we call them, is quite a bit more than we spend year to year. We do have baselined a recruitment staff of about 10 to 15 people, plus a number of uniform members that are detailed. We'll get you the exact dollar amount of that baseline recruitment staff. And then in a recruitment year, we typically spend around $10 to $12 million on the recruitment campaign itself. And we can send you over a more detailed breakdown of what that's for, but it's things like staffing, as well as a lot of advertisements and a lot of ads.
Yeah, if you could get us that information, that would be great. Okay, I want to hand it over to, one last question, I guess, to maybe Chief Hodgins or Commissioner, if you want to take it. But just going back to the 5th firefighter again, what we saw at Twin Parks in the Bronx, do we think anything would have been different if we had the 5th firefighter there?
Let me take it. So, although it was, a very tragic event, and we all know what happened. Our response was very quick to the building. The fire being on the 3rd floor does not require, anything out of the ordinary. We had over 200 firefighters on the scene. I don't believe that it would have made a significant difference at that fire.
Thank you, Chief. Okay, I want to hand it over to my co-chair, Councilwoman Ariola, for her line of questioning.
Much appreciated, Chairman. So Acting Commissioner Cavanaugh, you and I met early on at the firehouse where Jesse Gerhardt had passed away, and we were there with his fellow firefighters. And one of the top issues you and I discussed was the 5th firefighter and the need for it. Now, during all these hearings, when I have been fighting along with Chair Brannan for the 5th firefighter for your department, the narrative has changed. Now, what I have here, and now it's turned to a collective bargaining issue, but I have in my hand over 30 engine companies throughout this city that encompass Councilmember Marte, Rivera, Botcher, Powers, Brewer, Abreu, Ayala, Richardson, Jordan, Della Rosa, Dinowitz, Riley, Sanchez, Felice, Stevens, Salamanca, Farias, Moya, Caban, Gennaro, Krishan, Juan, Williams, Adrian Adams, our speaker, Crystal Hudson, Chiose, Nurse, Rita Joseph, Darlene Mealy, Charles Barron, Kalman Yeager, Councilmember Lewis, Councilmember Vernikov, and Councilmember Kagan. All have high densely populated areas where there is not a fifth firefighter. To say that the fifth firefighter couldn't have helped at Twin Parks Fire is just not so, because you said, Chief Hodgins, at the last hearing that, of course, the more firefighters, the better. Now, although there was a quick response by the first engine, and 43 seconds later, the second engine came, and over 200, to your own testimony, firefighters were there. What kind of gaps were left in other areas, like I just mentioned now, that have high instances of fires and would have been left without their engine companies available because there wasn't a fifth firefighter, and those engine companies had to respond to such an enormous fire?
Well, as far as Twin Parks, I understand, this is a very, hot button issue, and I agree, it's tragedy to something we've really not seen in many, many years. But, it's from operational level, there was no delay in stretching that hose line. It was done very quickly. And also on top of the little bit more than 3-minute response, for that instance, and the fire was contained to just the 3rd floor, although the smoke is what, unfortunately killed everybody. So we had engine companies in place on the 3rd floor, which effectively extinguished that fire within probably less than a minute upon arrival. In that case, what I'm saying is that the 5th firefighter would not have made a difference in that particular case as far as getting the line in position and putting out the fire, because they effectively did that with a lot of other help
Right.
with the arriving engine companies.
Right, with the help of over 200 firefighters from other areas and other engine companies that were left now unprotected if a fire occurred. And that is where the 5th firefighter on engine companies in areas that have high incidences of fire and are in very diverse communities seem to be the ones that do not have the 5th firefighter. So that is what Chair Brennan and I are fighting for. We're fighting for that 5th firefighter to be put back into areas that are diverse, that have a higher density population in high-rise buildings where we know that there is a response time and then a vertical response time. And we know that the 5th firefighter is instrumental in the prevention of the loss of lives. And I can't quite understand why we are no longer on the same page when we've had conversations regarding that. So we're here to ask questions about the preliminary budget, but I'm sorry, about the budget, the expense budget, but there are questions that you still haven't answered from our first preliminary budget meeting. And I'd like to first address those questions because they seem to be on the new questions as well. But there are council members that are here today that asked questions that when we asked for the answers so we could get back to those council members, no response was given by the FDNY. Such as, we'll go to the EMS issue that Council Member Holden inquired about. The emergency medical technicians have pay parity, which Chair Brannan first just brought up. And we were to get an answer. The questions were, can you please provide the department's most recent estimate with backup to show how the figure was determined on how many EMS workers we've had, how many have left because they're not getting pay parity, and how many have left because they have not been able, when they do want to go up to the fire department, they cannot transfer their time, which causes them then to leave, so we're unable to retain them. Now, EMS is probably one of our most diverse departments. If we made it more amenable for them to then go up and into the fire department and carry over their time, that would then automatically, organically diversify the fire department. So Councilmember Holden's question said, he wanted to say, what was the number? Where do we have the disparity? How many EMS members do we have? What are we budgeted for? And how many are on tap to be rehired? To be hired?
I'll let Lizette Christoph, speak to our head count right now. But I do believe that we sent in those responses. So we'll double back and double check where those might have been. But there's about 4,500 lines in the budget for EMS, and Lizette Christoph can provide some additional detail on that.
The answers never made it to our general counsel. We asked every week.
We'll
Go ahead.
look into that.
Lizette, thank you.
Sure. So for our current head count, our budgeted head count in FY22 for EMTs is 2,728. And we are currently above budgeted head count by 213. Our budgeted head count for paramedics is 957. And we are under budgeted head count by 116. For lieutenants, our budgeted head count is 499, and we are under budgeted head count by 71. For captains, our budgeted head count is 78, and we are over by 11.
Okay. Additionally, Councilmember Holden asked if what was the number of assaults on EMS members, and could you provide the figures from fiscal 2021-22 to date for all FDNY members disaggregated by EMS, fire, and civilian, as was done last year?
I'll let Chief Pastilli speak to the assault numbers.
Hi. Well, we have workplace violence incidents, so not necessarily assaults. Workplace violence incidents were 290 in 2020, 333 in 2021.
So you don't break it down to assaults or just hard on the job?
We can do that. I don't have that data right now, but we can certainly do that.
Perhaps you can get that for us. We're at the hearing, so perhaps you can have those numbers run and just circle back with us during this hearing.
I'll attempt to do that.
Thank you. Another council member, Powers, asked a question. He said, please share the number of dedicated members to outreach and education. This is a 4-part question, but that's the first.
We're going to pull up our response to the council, and we'll make sure we get that right now.
Yeah, Jack Kern's on the 27th. We have to send him a folder.
He asked also about the data on requests from schools for fire safety education by borough and school district. And what is the source of the funding for the FDNY Foundation? How is the foundation using the money? And is the cost for what is the cost for educating elementary school students in a school year? We're really focused on fire education. Fire education, and this is something I think we all can agree to. It needs to be taught in our schools. It needs to be on social media. It needs to be on television. We have to do outreach. So we need to know what we're working with.
Yeah, we absolutely agree. We are on television. We are on social media. We do educate in the schools. The answer to his question about, the foundation funding. We get $1 million from the FDNY Foundation every year for fire safety education, and that goes to both educators and PSAs and materials, multilingual materials. It also produces videos that we help distribute to add to our in-person, especially during COVID, to augment in-person teaching. So we have a pretty extensive operation. In addition to the members that are detailed to the unit, all of our fire field companies do educational events. So the entire fire workforce, which is quite large, as you know, a little over 11,000, is dedicated to those efforts. We did send a response to one of the staffers, Jack Kearns, I believe, with that breakdown that you had asked for. So we'll resend that so that you have it in terms of the detail on each school district.
Okay, for the education portion.
Yeah.
Okay, then I want to shift gears to fire inspectors. The preliminary budget hearing, we discussed fire inspectors being under head count and the importance of a prompt turnaround for fire inspection, especially for those where the inspection may have been delayed after the reassignment of inspectors for COVID-19 related enforcement. During public testimony after that hearing, after the administration had jumped off, there was testimony given by Oren Barzilay, who is the president of EMS, paramedics, and fire inspectors. He said that the numbers were not correct, that the numbers were much lower. So maybe you can just restate for the record now, how many inspectors do we have? What is the gap to bring you to the budgeted number? And what is the backlog of inspections because of the reassignment of fire inspectors to COVID-19 duty?
I will let Lizette give you our headcount numbers in that unit.
Thanks, Lizette.
So the civilian headcount overall for fire prevention, which includes inspectors, but also includes kind of more technical engineering titles that review plans and do other important work. The overall budgeted headcount is 588, and we currently have 520 active heads. So there are 68 vacancies overall.
Okay. And what is the backlog for their inspections right now? The buildings that have not yet been inspected because they were reassigned. What is the backlog?
So there are numerous types of inspections, as you know, in various different areas. We can go through and break down those for you. I would just say that it's far more complex. The backlog of inspections due to COVID, has a number of sources that are not just related to inspectors being reassigned. Unfortunately, the unit lost a number of members to COVID. And as you've highlighted here, hiring has been quite difficult. Some of that's COVID related and is bouncing back. And some of that is because there are some very highly technical titles that are in very short supply across the city, not just in the fire department. So it's a bit of a more of a complex set of factors that have led to a post-COVID backlog. But that being said, we are being given all of the resources that we need by the city, and the mayor's office is working hand in hand with us because I think we all agree that that backlog must be addressed. It's an essential part of the city's recovery. So we are doing that, and we can break down the different types of, permits and where backlogs are in each area of the Bureau for you.
All right. Okay, getting back to questions asked at the last preliminary budget hearing, we'll get back to Councilmember Holden, who inquired about the timeline for buildings being inspected. And can you answer the question, is every high-rise building inspected? Have you caught up on that since? Or are there high-rise buildings with multifamily dwellings that have yet to be inspected?
So there's two different buckets of inspections with very different, sort of post-COVID challenges. One is the inspections done by our fire companies, and those are the inspections that I think you would be referring to in a high-rise multiple dwelling. Those have continued, and we are still inspecting those. Those are based on a risk-based algorithm. So, they're inspected based on the relative risk, not on simply inspecting each building on some preset schedule. And those are ongoing. The inspections I think that you're referring to with backlogs have to do with more complex things like plan review, fire alarm plan review. And that primarily affects new building.
Well, it's existing buildings as well. And my next question is, we know that the Twin Parks fire cost 17 people their lives, many of them children, and they were set to be inspected, yet they were not inspected prior to. Have they been inspected since? I'm assuming yes.
That's mistaken. They were not set to be inspected. They did have an inspection scheduled in May of the prior year, and that inspection was completed, and there were no violations at that time.
In May of the prior year.
May of the prior year. Yes.
So when testimony was given at hearings saying that they were to be inspected the month before, and they were not, then that was incorrect testimony, you're saying? Even though
that is mistaken. I'm not sure where that comes from. We have, looked into that at your urging. They were scheduled to be inspected in May of the prior year, and they were inspected in May of the prior year.
Councilmember Brewer asked at the last preliminary budget hearing that it can be a long time from an inspection after it has been requested. And you, Acting Commissioner Kavanaugh, noted that additional resources and a 10-point plan has been developed to address the issue. Other than the 15 investigators from the November plan, what resources have been added or will be added?
So there's three ways that we're tackling these backlogs that we know, everybody is concerned about, including Councilmember Brewer, and we feel that ourselves and we hear that we want to do something about it. So one is in hiring, which we just talked through, which is mostly about being able to fill, vacant positions that we already have that are particularly hard to recruit. And so we are working with the mayor's office on that, of finding new ways to get in these hard to recruit titles. The other is technology. We finally have moved the system to an all electronic one, and that allows us to find a number of efficiencies in the process, and also will allow for, sort of more transparency for the customer, that they'll be able to log into a portal and see what is needed on their inspections. And then the last is a customer service aspect. And I think probably some of you saw, myself and Commissioner Kim were out and about in the last week for Small Business Week with some of our customer service agents right there in the community. That's something we're moving towards, making sure that people know when an inspection is coming, are ready for the inspection, and have somebody who is walking them through the process to make sure that that inspection not only gets done in a timely manner, but that they're ready for the inspection when it happens, so they don't end up failing, and then that causes further delays to their business and obviously additional inspections required of the department. So those are the three areas that we're tackling right now. And I think, some of that you're seeing already, and some of that you'll see unrolling in the next few months.
Okay, and she further asked about backlog of inspections, and she had asked you to share the backlog by month for the last 12 months. Perhaps you can get that information to her directly.
I can, and it is in what we sent. So we're going to make sure that you guys have what we sent over in late April.
Yeah, sorry, this is Chair Brannon. I just wanted to jump in. I mean, we all have a finite amount of time here, and the fact that Chair Ariola has to, we're sort of reliving what should have been answered in prelim. Is there a reason why we didn't get all this information beforehand? Because we now have to move into exec questions, and we're still going over prelim questions from 2 months ago.
We sent over a response, so I would say I share your frustration, and we'll work to figure out where that.
Okay, when was that? Can you tell us when the response was sent?
The 27th of April.
Okay, I mean, that was, and the hearing, the response was sent on the 27th in April, and when was the hearing? March?
In March, but on the 27th of April, Mr. Kern has just updated me, the portion of our questioning was sent over, not the questions that were all asked. It wasn't a complete answer of the questions, and the questions were then followed up multiple times. And this is something that's happening and is generic to a lot of our hearings, and we're not going to be successful, and we're not going to be able to progress if we don't get the answers that we need when we're told, we'll get back to you. And that is something
I mean,
that,
it's not just about respect for the body. It's respect for everybody's time, including FDNY. We don't want to waste anybody's time. And now we're recasting, stuff from March and April when we're in May and we're in exec hearings. So we want to make sure we've got all this so that Chair Ariola doesn't have to go through all these unanswered questions. I mean, it's not acceptable.
I think we share your frustration and we'll figure out where those answers went, but we certainly agree with you that we like our working relationship. I think we have a good one and we definitely put together those answers. So we'll make sure this is smoother going forward.
okay, and then I'll just.
Thanks, Chair. Sorry. Thank you.
No, thank you. And then I just want to talk about the lithium batteries. This is on the current. It says that recently a photo from FDNY press conference following a fire shared dozens of bikes and scooters and stated the landlord was issued 3 violations for illegal occupancy. How many of these types of fires have occurred in the calendar year? In this photo, just to put it into perspective, this fire was caused and it had over a dozen piled up scooters with lithium batteries.
Yes, I've seen the photo. It's very concerning. I'm sure you and I share that. And lithium ion battery fires have gone up substantially this year. I'm going to pull the number in 1 second out of my notes here, but it is, I'd say it's quite a concern of the fire department that you're seeing these bikes regularly cause fires, which can, cause serious property damage and the potential loss of life. So it's something that we are, working closely on with a number. Sorry, I'm just pulling the number with a number of entities to try to figure out, what is causing these fires? Is it something about the bikes, or is it something aftermarket, about the way that they're charged, or batteries that are put into them that aren't compatible. But certainly we are working very hard to get to the bottom of why these are suddenly causing these spate of fires and to do something about it. And we have done some outreach already specifically to communities where there have been a lot of these fires in order to, at least in this interim period, make sure they're using them as safely as possible until we can better understand as a department and as a city, what it is about the bikes that makes them so potentially dangerous.
Right, and I think that it has to do because of and this was legislated in 2022 with Local Law 47, where it addressed the safe storage of batteries, chargers, including provisions around how to use the batteries and how they should be stored and charged. So,
yeah, I have the numbers for you too. Sorry, it just took me a second to pull it out. There's been 60.
Key here is my point. Enforcement is key. So we need to have inspectors out looking to make sure that this law is being complied with, because although it might be a restaurant on the main floor, people live above many of those stores, and that's a problem.
Yes, we definitely agree with that. I would just say that these are not all restaurants that this is happening in. This is happening in a lot of private dwellings. And we believe it's because many of the delivery drivers take their bikes home. And so, obviously we encourage people to use the charger that came with the bike. We encourage them to make sure they're not using aftermarket batteries. But that being said, it is it's very difficult for many of these delivery workers to have a safe place to charge these bikes, and they're using them, quite frequently, which sort of causes the need to have a number of additional batteries. So, we think that there's more that we can do as a department to work with them to determine, really what's causing these fires, how do we prevent them, and make sure at the same time that we're educating people about the safest way to use the bikes. And just so you have it, in 2022 so far, we've had 60 fire investigations related to the bikes, 8 injuries, and 1 fatality. And those are all fires where an e-bike was thought to be the cause of the fire.
And that's a combination of private dwellings and commercial?
Private and commercial, yeah. And we can get that breakdown too. I think actually more of them are in private dwellings, but we'll double check.
Okay. I'll turn it back to council now for questions from my very patient colleagues.
Thank you, Chair Ariola. So I will call you council members in the order with which you raised your hands. And I just want to remind council members that please wait for the sergeants to give the go-ahead, and they will begin the 5-minute clock. So the order of hands that I have, some have come down and some have come back up. So I'm going to just read the names that I saw up. We'll start with Councilmember Barron, followed by Councilmembers Holden, Ayala, Brooks Powers, and Sanchez, but we'll first start with Councilmember Barron.
Starting time.
Thank you very much, and I appreciate the chair's strong advocacy for having firefighting efficiency and competently fighting in our communities that really have a need for a fifth firefighter. But I want to deal with the big elephant in the room that's hardly ever mentioned or slightly mentioned and passed over, and that is racism. It is sickening that we are still talking about this in this FDNY fire department. Is the most racist of all the agencies that we have. We don't want to hear nothing more about minority recruitments. You're trying to get more on candidates because that doesn't lead to the positions. We've been going at this for a while, and right now, I believe, according to a 2021 study, 75% of the fire department is white and mostly white men, and 8% Black, 14% Latino, Latina. It is absolutely absurd that we're still talking about this in the 21st century. I remember going way back with Paul Washington, who was the president of the Vulcan Society. And the Vulcan Society has been fighting against this for decades. And you know what? It seems like even when we get consent decrees, lawsuits, protests, everything. I want to read something to you that David Jones wrote in an article, and that what a judge said. First, the judge, the FDNY's rank and file has never resembled the communities it serves. A U.S. District Judge, Nicholas G. Garofis, whose ruling forced the FDNY to overhaul its recruiting practices, called the department, quote, a stubborn bastion of white male privilege whose recruiting roadblocks are a shameful blight on the record of 6 mayors. And then it also reads that the history that's facing the fire department now is a history where you have over 147 years of consent decrees, minority recruitment programs, discrimination lawsuits funded by taxpayers. I mean, come on now. We've been doing this for a long time. And in our communities, many Black families say they hate to call the fire department if they have some smoke and they have a little pot on the stove, but they'll come in and tear up the whole house. And I don't know that that happens everywhere, but it certainly happens in our community. The racism is thick. The white male privilege is thick, and it has to stop now. It has to stop now. You know, we even have, this is something else they do. The solution is not to simply grow the pool of Black firefighter candidates. The question is, who gets invited to take the physical assessment after passing the test? And how is the waiting list manipulated by FDNY so that Blacks who make the grade are left to languish and never be called in for the slots, to fill the slots? Come on, y'all, we got to face this. Racism is alive and all too well in the FDNY. And we come with these, oh, we're doing my recruiting, we're reaching out more. Been saying that for decades. 75% white men, white people are not 75% of New York City. Blacks and Latinos, we're over 55%. Asians, add them to the mix, and 60 some odd percent of New York City is not white men. And at some point, it has to be seriously addressed. No more lip service, no more I hear you, it takes time. And I don't understand how we have a Black mayor, maybe fine to you, but until he addresses this issue here, and not just any Black. This is another thing. I talked to Paul Washington years ago in the Vulcan Society. We can't just have any Black that the system picks, because sometimes we have Blacks that get put in positions, and if they're a commissioner or an assistant commissioner, and they perpetuate the same policies. We need a radical change, and we need this to be
Time
addressed
expired.
very seriously.
Thank you, Councilmember Barron. And next we will turn to Councilmember
No,
Holden.
next. I
Oh,
want to hear a response.
oh, sorry, sir.
I share your frustrations,
And I'm
Councilmember.
not frustrated, and I don't want you to share my frustration. No placating remarks. I want to hear concrete, solid solutions. I don't want you to feel my pain.
I
want you to
understand
come
that.
up with positive solutions that's going to change these numbers.
Yeah, I definitely think that we can do that. I think that you will say that you've heard these things before. And certainly I am a student of fire department history, and you are correct. There have been lawsuits and dissent decrees before, and they've made a difference. And then, you've sort of seen a backsliding of the difference that they made. And so I think it's our mission to make sure that difference is sustained, and we remain under court monitorship. I don't know if you agree, but that court monitorship has been quite sustained. I think it's been sustained longer than previous efforts, in my estimation. And one of the biggest difference that it's made is it's assured that people are assigned to firehouses in the neighborhoods where they grew up, which are the most diverse neighborhoods. And so you do see a substantial change in the most diverse neighborhoods of the city, and there being far more diverse fire companies in those cities, in those neighborhoods. And I
There's
think
no
that,
diverse change and no substantial changes. 8% Black, period. There's no substantial change. And diversity, I'm talking Black, because when we talk diversity, it's such a broad network that it never includes enough Black people. So I'm talking about Black people. When you say minorities and diversity and all of that stuff, we usually can easily get excluded from that because you represent diversity, a white woman. And so I'm talking about Black people, and there hasn't been no substantial change, not even with the monitoring. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Barron. And next we'll turn to Councilmember Holden.
Starting time.
Thank you, Chairs Brannon and Ariola. A great line of questioning and a very enlightening hearing. My first question is, EMS workers are telling me that their stations are bursting at the seams and are overcrowded. So before the pandemic, more stations were planned, we're told. Is that still the plan, to build more stations?
that still is part of the long-term planning, yes.
All right, because we'd like to see that plan. We'd like to see how many are going to be built and in what locations, because nothing seems to be improving. And also I saw an FDNY job bulletin for a CPR instructor at the EMS Academy. The bulletin asks for firefighters. Is there any reason why EMS or EMTs can't apply for this role?
I'm not actually sure which role.
Well, it's for a CPR instructor at the EMS Academy. That's what else do you need?
No, I mean, we have EMS people doing that. So that's why I'm not sure this particular job posting, if maybe that was just a typo. It's something that we currently have. So I will find that job posting and try to figure out why it would be worded that way.
Yeah, I'm interested in that because it seems to exclude EMS workers.
Yeah, we have a CPR unit actually, that is all EMS workers that goes out and teaches CPR. I'm not sure, maybe Chief Pistilli might know which position that is. If not, we'll just try to find the posting and figure out why that was.
I believe it was a posting for CFR instructor, not CPR instructor. And that was just to bolster their staff because they know they have a large class coming in. We do have EMS members who participate in CFR instruction, and that this was just allowing fire department members to put in for that as well.
Okay, I'm just going to go quickly because I don't want to lose time. My staff and I regularly tour our firehouses to see that, if they need improvement in capital. Recently, we were looking at redoing kitchens over in two of the firehouses in my district. The price tag for each house came in like 1.2 million for, and these weren't, these were smaller kitchens. They weren't like, you know, a very, very large kitchen, almost like a little larger than household kitchens. 1.2 million, which is like, you know, I'd like to know what, you know, what kind of equipment is going in this, because it doesn't seem to be more than just a stove, refrigerator, and so forth. I know they're expensive ones, but you know, what are we doing to lower these prices here? Because 1.2 million per kitchen is a little out of line. I mean, you could build you could put a building up for 1.2 million.
Yeah, they are sort of industrial grade kitchens, so they are a little different than what you would put in a home, and those costs do include both equipment and labor. I'll let Commissioner Kristoff dive a little bit further into why that is the cost.
Yes, so the cost does seem very high, but to give context to that cost, a lot of our facilities are very old. So the average age of our firehouses is 92 years old. And so often when you're going in to do a project that seems small, it is large enough to trigger new code requirements. So there are a lot of other updates that are needed to meet current building and fire codes. Additionally, because of the older age of our facilities, a lot of them require abatement. So often the scope ends up expanding to include asbestos abatement. And given the fact that these are operational facilities, phasing becomes a very important part of the project. You don't want to have to shut the firehouse down. So the budget often includes the setup of temporary facilities to use during construction, as well as accounts for that phasing and working in a very tight environment to minimize any disruption to the field.
Still, I could see $500,000. I just don't see 1.2. I'd like a breakdown, because I'm not going to fund something where it's, I want to see you know, something that breaks it down where I could say, all right, this is reasonable. But I don't want, because I get this from the Parks Department too. Like, it's always like, you know, double or triple what it should be. My last question is, does the department plan on increasing mental health services for our fire staff, especially EMS and EMT workers? At a recent, you know, hearing that we had, we heard that mental health services are limited for EMS and EMT workers, and they often have to pay out of pocket. So, you know, why are we going to increase the you know, the mental health services, especially for EMT and EMS staff?
Time expired.
So we have expanded services post-pandemic for our EMS workers specifically. Two big pieces of that. One is that we started an EMS peer program, which is something the fire suppression side already had, and had those EMS peers go out and visit each and every station and each and every member in the wake of COVID to, you know, both talk to them about what they've been through, but also to let them know what services are available at CSU and how EMS can access them. And then we've also started a program where we cover the copays for the members of EMS. There is one substantial difference between EMS and fire, which is fire has unlimited medical leave and EMS does not, and that would apply to mental health as well. And that is a matter of collective bargaining. So that is something I think we'll address in our other conversations as we were discussing. I assume that's really what the union was referring to, because that is a frustrating difference for them. But in terms of services available through our counseling services unit, they are just as available to EMS as fire. And we've really put some outreach efforts into ensuring that EMTs and paramedics on the ground know where CSU is, how to access it, and that it is available for them, that it is not just for members of fire suppression.
Thank you, Commissioner. Thank you, chairs.
Thank you, Councilmember Holden. And next we'll turn to Deputy Speaker Ayala.
Thank you.
Starting time.
Thank you. Good morning, everyone. I have two questions. One is related to the budget for bariatric ambulances citywide. So as the rates of obesity continue to climb, we've started to receive a request for funds for ambulances that better meet the needs of patients in need of a bariatric ambulance. And so I don't remember ever having heard in a hearing or even in the budget if there is an allocation set aside specifically to meet that need. So I would love to hear you know, where we are on that. And then two, On the Be Heard program, the mayor recently announced a $55 million increase to the budget to expand the Be Heard program. And I was wondering what the percentage of those funds was that was being redirected to EMS.
Commissioner Christoph can break down the Be Heard funding down for you.
Sure. And to briefly respond also on bariatric ambulances, I will say that the executive budget does include some funding from both the Bronx Borough President and the Manhattan Borough President for bariatric ambulances. We can look to see if there's other funding.
Is there any, I mean, I've spoken to both the Manhattan Borough President and the Bronx Borough President. So we're splitting the cost on those at my request. But is there any funding in the budget currently, or any funding coming through the executive budget that would help offset, not only, because I don't think that having 2 ambulances, citywide, when we're seeing an increase in individuals suffering from obesity is enough.
Yeah, I would have to go and look back at the funding. Funding for ambulances is also a little complicated because most funding for ambulances is actually not in the fire department's budget. It's part of the health and hospitals budget. But we can investigate further.
Yeah, I'm sorry. And the reason why I ask is because there is a correlation here, right? Because when you have a person that's morbidly obese, usually the FDNY has to respond. But then, it creates a lot of, humiliation and embarrassment for the patient while undergoing whatever medical crisis they're in. And again, I haven't heard a single word on this issue, even though we have seen, the data shows that there has been an increase in obesity citywide. And so this is really important. So if you can get back to me on that, I would really appreciate that.
We can also let Chief Bastilli speak to, how EMS is dealing with both the bariatric ambulances, but as you mentioned, care for obese patients in general.
Sure. So right now, we currently have 2 bariatric ambulances located across the city. We did ask for additional funding just so that should we need to deploy them, they're closer to the patient. We use vehicles called Me2s, a very large bus vehicle that is federally funded, UASI, and we are able to transport bariatric patients in those vehicles, but they're coming to end of life, and they're a very large vehicle to move around the city in order to transport one patient. So we did convert 2 ambulances to bariatric ones, and we'd like to convert up to 3 more. So there's 1 in every borough. But we manage bariatric calls based on obviously what our capacity is to carry the patient. And we also have stair chairs. Those are chairs that carry people downstairs that can accommodate obese patients. And we have new stretchers that are power stretchers that can accommodate patients up to 700 pounds. So the combination of all those things would help us better manage that community.
Okay, and do you feel that 1 per borough is sufficient? And how, I mean, like if I'm calling 911, is the dispatcher asking me this question whether or not I need that type of ambulance, or is this something that the EMS staff, once they get to the unit, realize and then send to get, like, how, what is the wait time? Does that prolong, the amount of time that a person goes without, the amount of time it takes to get them to the hospital?
So yeah, it depends on how the call comes in and what information is included in the call. Sometimes there's information that the patient is obese right up front, and then we can start rolling that unit. We can roll it usually after a unit gets there and requests it. So there are some times when it could delay it somewhat, but it very rarely comes up as a problem.
Time expired.
All right, and the question, I'm sorry, Mr. Chair, if I could get a response to Be Heard.
What was the question? Oh, funding.
the funding for the Be Heard program. So the executive budget includes sort of citywide $55 million for the Be Heard program next year. That's $37 million in the fire department's budget and $18 million in the health and hospitals budget. And so in our budget, that includes about $10.5 million that's associated with the dedicated units, both for the existing pilot areas and planned expansion areas. And the larger portion of the funding, about $26.5 million, is tied to the mental health training that all of EMS is receiving, as well as a collectively bargained differential related to having completed the first piece of that training.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you. Not seeing Councilmember Brooks Powers on the Zoom, we'll turn to Councilmember Sanchez, followed by Councilmember Yeager, and then Councilmember Farias, but we'll turn to Councilmember Sanchez.
Starting time.
Thank you, Chair Ariola. Congratulations for another wonderful hearing. I really appreciate how you've followed up on all of your colleagues' concerns from last time. And so I have two things. First, I want to echo Councilmember Barron's points earlier, and I want to echo those points, not just to the front lines, but also to the dispatchers, right? The dispatchers at FDNY are disproportionately white and male compared to dispatchers at even NYPD, and they're paid substantially more than those at NYPD who are disproportionately women and people of color. And so I just want to enjoin that, appreciating completely the work that the FDNY does for the city of New York does not mean that we don't criticize where criticism is necessary. And so absolutely want to echo my colleagues' remarks there. And then second, I want to continue a line of questioning that, one second. Just muting because I'm on two devices. Just continuing a line of questioning from Chair Ariola's concern about inspection and inspection headcounts. So at the Twin Parks fire safety hearing, we talked a lot about the RBIS and pointed out that the RBIS is weaker in predicting fires in communities of color and low-income communities. And you said that FDNY said that you would share your methodology so that we could take a look at the council. I don't believe we received that, so please do send that. And then the question is on the proactive inspection. So I believe that 40K inspections are conducted by FDNY each year. That is 4% of New York City's 1 million buildings. So the question is, how has the mayor's executive order from last month changed this? What is coordination looking like with HPD and DOB? And what can we expect to see in terms of, can we expect to see more proactive inspections? Do we have the bodies for that?
So I'll respond to both parts of that. I think that much like yourself and Councilmember Barron, I share your frustrations on the slowness of the progress. And I'd say that I think there are two things that are required to make that real change in the long term for the fire department. One is a sustained commitment to it, and the other is structural change, which is something that you mentioned around the different workforces and pay equity and looking at their pay and benefits compared to their colleagues. So I think I'd harken back to our original conversation at the start of this hearing about EMS and pay parity and the importance of, executive input in these conversations, because I think that those are the two ways that we ensure that we all see the changes that we want to in the long term and that we don't just get lip service.
If I may, I've also, this is more anecdotal, but my community is 98.5% people of color. And the stories that I've heard of folks who have been in these ranks and have had hate speech left on their desk, have had extreme intimidation on the site, being one of the only people of color in some of these departments. It's more than just the pay structure, but also it has to be a deep look and real avenues for people to express their complaints and not be intimidated when they're faced with these horrible circumstances.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. Sustained structural change is what's required, and an openness from the top down in the administration to hear those concerns aired without repercussion is essential. And it's certainly, a key tenet of my leadership, and, also be happy to come talk to you a little more offline about what you've heard, so that can inform, what I'm implementing here. I think, on the second part around inspections, I do think, as you mentioned, we have an algorithm. An algorithm is only as good as the data put into it. And so I think that one of the more essential pieces, or one of the pieces we're most excited about the mayor's executive order, is that we're gonna see how that additional data makes our algorithm even better. Our educational efforts are focused in communities like yours that are at highest risk of fires, which are largely diverse non-white communities. And so I think you're going to see an even more focused set of inspections and education around the effect, the outcomes of that executive order, and what the mayor's office has done to ensure that the agencies are working together towards the same goal.
Thank you.
So much.
Thank you, Councilmember
That's all.
Sanchez.
Council, I just want to acknowledge we've been joined by Council Members Riley and Gennaro.
I'm sorry, I just wanted to add something. I wanted to ask Deputy Chief Pastilli if it was possible to get in writing the breakdown that you shared with us a few minutes ago.
Which breakdown are you referring to? Is it
Breakdown on the number of beds, the type of beds, where we have them.
Okay, sure, no problem.
Yeah, I think, thank you, Deputy Speaker. I think I think for the acting commissioner and the chiefs on the call, we're gonna put together a document with any follow-ups and things we don't feel were adequately addressed. So we'll put that together in a document and get it to you as soon as the hearing's over.
Thank you.
Next, we'll turn to Councilmember Yeager.
Starting time.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair, Madam Chair. I don't want to beat on Councilman Holden's dead horse about capital, but I sort of feel like I have to, because I guess it's great that we have these hearings, because I could hear that it costs $1.2 million for a kitchen in his district and the same price for a kitchen in a firehouse in my district. And I don't know how you can come up with the exact to the penny same price for two different kitchens and two different firehouses. And it almost seems like these prices are being, picked out of a hat, and it's just so random. And just by way of example, when I got the email from the fire department with their capital requests, and, it said, well, one particular firehouse, and the fire department knows its victims in terms of council members, because it knows that I like this particular firehouse very much. In my first year, I paid $375,000 for windows. It was because I was new and young and so excited, and didn't think that cost made any sense. But what do I know? I'm new, young, and excited. Now I have the experience of 4 years, and I know when I'm being scammed. And so they said $1.2 million for the windows at this particular firehouse, but also behind door number 2, I can choose to do a generator for an engine company for also $1.2 million. Or if I go to door number 3 at another firehouse, I could do $1.2 million, and it would pay for a generator there. I asked for a breakdown. Actually, my email said, hello, $1.2 million to renovate a kitchen. That has to be a typo. 3 weeks later, I get an email saying, and I'd like this all to be on the record, so that's why I'm going to go through this, $130,000 for the drawings, permits, and filing. They will be gutting the existing kitchen and setting up a brand new kitchen, so there are costs associated with filings, permits, and design fees. Okay, I guess, what do I know? $120,000 for appliances for the kitchen. That better come with a guide to operate the appliances, because $120,000 for appliances for a kitchen, I don't know. I mean, my parents own their house, and they don't have $120,000 worth of appliances in their kitchen. $600,000 for costs for materials such as fiber optics, conduit, counters, wood, flooring, and cabinets, and $350,000 for labor hours. Okay, look, I'm not a construction guy. I'm a small country lawyer from Brooklyn. I don't really know about this kind of stuff and how much things cost. But with a straight face, I know we're not all in the same room, got to look at each other, and we have to all just at least nod our heads and say we're being scammed. Now, I'm not saying that the fire department is particularly responsible for this. I'm assuming there's some other department somewhere in this city that's making up these numbers, and you're simply the conduit to pass these numbers along to us. But you got to, Commissioner, you've been there for a while. I know you haven't been commissioner for a long time, but you've been a deputy commissioner for a very long time. You got to be able to turn around and say no, and don't pass these numbers on to us without raising a very big red flag and say, look, I'm a very experienced fire official here in the city of New York, and I know when I'm being scammed. We're being scammed, right? I mean, it's not just me saying that.
No, you're definitely not. There's really no comparison between a private home, as you mentioned, and a firehouse. It is much more akin to an industrial kitchen that you might see in a restaurant or even a factory or facility. So, as Lizette Christoph mentioned, there's also a number of things that go along with the age of our buildings. They are quite old, many of them well over 100 years old, and require substantial work to be done when any sort of renovation is underway. And there's 50 people living and working 24/7 in these houses, and what is put in is really industrial and grade, and is meant to last for a very long time. So that is where the expense comes from. I don't know if Commissioner Christoph wants to add anything to that, but we're most certainly not giving you inaccurate numbers.
Look, I with respect, I think that if you told me that $1.2 million paid for a brand new firehouse, everything in it was going to be brand new, they were going to replace the doors, give it a whole paint job and the whole thing, that's fine. But to just say for a kitchen, I don't care what you're putting, the stuff's got to be gold plated for it to come out to that kind of money. And I would just say, if you want to convince me, go to the last firehouse that you replaced the kitchen that cost $1.2 million, send over all the bills. Let us look at them. I mean, I just want to know what people are charging for this stuff, because I hate to be the person who says it like this, but I got a guy who can come to any one of your firehouses. Okay, I represent a very large district in Brooklyn. I am sure that I could find people in Brooklyn who would happily do a job, a spectacular job. And if it breaks, you know who to go to, for far less than $1.2 million. And not to blame you for another department, but I represent the home of the $3 million park bathroom that was installed 3 years ago that isn't working. And I'm not blaming you for that. Believe me, Commissioner, it's not your fault. But I'm saying that, these numbers, we know they're not real. We know they're not real. So the question is, who's going to help us get to the bottom of proving that they're not real, and how we come to what the real number is? And if the city is actually writing checks for $1.2 million to do a firehouse kitchen, we ought to know that and somehow, raise a very big red flag about that, because I think that money is being wasted. I just don't believe the city's actually paying those numbers. I think that that's the number that you tell us and insert it into the budget. And at some point, I guess maybe it's my optimism that hopes that the numbers come in far less than that. But if we're actually paying $1.2 million to do a kitchen in a firehouse, I love the firefighters in my district. I love them. And I know they live in the firehouse. And I know that we ask of them more than we ask of any other municipal employee. We ask them to all bunk together for a dozen hours at a time. We have to give them the facilities to live, to sleep, to eat. We do. I get that. I also get that $1.2 million is not real. And if I went into any firehouse and told them that it would cost $1.2 million for a kitchen, they would look at me like I'm out of my mind. So I don't know what the solution is, but I do want to flag this in a very public way, because I think that, look, I'm not a commissioner. I'm not a big shot here. And I think that, it's something that your department needs to, if it's not you doing it, raise the red flag on those who are. And it's not really a question, it's just kind of a comment, but I did want to say it out public, because I have had these emails exchanged with your agency in private, and I think that, it ought to be aired, because these numbers are just not real. They can't be. That's it. Thank you very much, Mr. Chair, Madam Chair. I'm not asking for an answer because I don't think there is one right now, but I did want to flag this in public. Thank you very much, Commissioner. It's good to see you.
Good to see you too.
Thank you, Councilmember. Next, we'll turn to Councilmember Farias, followed by Councilmember Carr.
Starting time.
Hi, good morning, everyone. I do not want to belabor the point that my colleagues have brought up. I also was here to just ask some general questions about the capital budget process. I too have as a new member, have a generator upgrade, which both seem pretty sound and reasonable requests, but the amounts also are astronomical for what I assume someone who is not a contractor or anything like that, but what I can see is really big numbers in comparison to the capital budget that I have to serve, 200,000 people in Council District 18. And so any assistance or any additional information that you do have, Commissioner, in helping us with that breakdown, or better understanding this process or contracting process that you can lean on us on, that we can rectify, would be helpful. And then I guess the only question that does come to mind, and sorry if this is already listed out in the mayor's budget, but when we're looking at the capital budget for the fire department as a whole citywide, are these individual capital firehouse requests lumped into a larger request for the city to see if they get met? And additionally, we're requesting per firehouse per district to support the larger request, or does each firehouse have to lean on each individual member for their capital requests?
They do not need to lean on the individual council member. We do bundle our capital needs and we submit them to the mayor's office. And as you may have heard at the top, but if not, we can go over it again. We got one of our most substantial and most important capital needs were met by the mayor's office this year to replace apparatus floors, which are really operationally essential. So this is just above and beyond when we come to the council members. Both, I know that there's a desire by some of you to fund some of the houses in your district. I know some of you are very close to your firehouses. And these are things that, potentially in future years, as things age and things become operationally critical, certainly that the mayor's office funds. This is just something that's above and beyond, and often is at the interest of the council members and us to meet the needs of the local firehouse on a grassroots level. So
Okay.
it's not something where if you don't fund it, we're not going to get those needs met eventually. And as we've discussed here, it's a really complex process, and it can seem like a lot of money for some of these things, but I would be happy offline both to walk you guys through the process, but also to walk you through, with some of your local firehouses so you can see what we're talking about. I think it would help to just see the size and how substantial some of these things are that we do. So you can understand why at least they're on another scale. I know you're going to have questions about the process and certainly can go over that, and anywhere we can find efficiencies, we're happy to work with the council on, but we're also happy to walk you through so you can see some of the things that we're pitching to your office, what the scale of what they really are inside of a firehouse.
Yeah, absolutely. I will definitely take you up on that. Obviously, for me, when I'm looking at capital requests, something like a generator seems higher priority than a kitchen upgrade, even though I understand the point of folks being there for such long hours, not really making it home. All of it seems necessary. But as my colleague, Councilmember Yeager, stated, I don't want to be too eager in the beginning when maybe there's other creative ways we can look at, and that I'd love to talk offline about that. So thank you for following up with your response, and I look forward to offline conversations. I will give the rest of my time back.
Thank you, Councilmember. And next we'll turn to Councilmember Carr.
Starting time.
Thank you so much to Chairs Brannan and Ariola for convening this crucial hearing on the exec budget. Commissioner, good to see you. My question relates to the fifth man. I know we talked about that earlier in the hearing. 2 of the 20 that have the fifth man currently are on Staten Island. They're both in the North Shore of the borough. And so that leaves a significant amount of territory in Staten Island without an engine company that has the fifth man. And while admittedly we're not nearly as dense as our sister boroughs, we are rather large, right? It takes companies a long time to get across it. And while a fifth man doesn't get an engine company there sooner, it does increase their response times once they get on site. And so I'm just curious, again, what are the criteria for what made the 20 be selected as they are. When was the last time you guys made an assessment about maybe adding to that? And I'd love to hear your responses.
I'll let Chief Hodgins answer that.
So the 20 engine companies, that was decided in collective bargaining with the UFA and the city. You know, in Staten Island, which is where I live, you know, the engine companies with 5 firefighters have those unique situations I spoke about earlier, meaning are in an area where they may operate alone, or where there are more complex buildings that require, you know, a difficult hand stretch of the hose line. And a large portion, particularly of the South Shore of Staten Island, is mostly private dwelling homes, 1 and 2 stories, which is a relatively, on a scale of different types of hose stretches, what we considered an easy hose stretch of 1 or 2 lengths of hose, as opposed to 6, 7, or 8 lengths of hose in a taller building. So that is, you know, the reason, you know, that the 2 that are on Staten Island are where they are. It's based on the geographical and the type of buildings that they respond to.
Okay, well, I'm just going to go on the record and say, you know, I support this effort to put a 5th man in every engine company in the city. I think it's absolutely required. It's only going to make things better. And I think Chair Brandon said it best, right? It's been acknowledged the more firefighters we have on site, the better. And I think that's the case no matter the building stock you're generally dealing with, especially since in parts of my district below the boulevard, you're dealing with building stock that was created under earlier iterations of the building code. And those aren't necessarily, you know, as fire safe as what we've seen constructed in recent years. I want to turn my attention to the capital process like my colleagues. Thankfully, I think there was only 1 capital ask coming my way this year, and it was met on the admin side, as Commissioner Kavanaugh referenced. So I thank you guys for your advocacy on that. But in terms of your process, is DDC your sort of contracting partner when you do your capital work, or is that something that you guys do on your own?
So it just depends on the size of the project. We do a lot of it on our own, but DDC is involved for larger builds.
So in terms of DDC, are they going to be involved in the kind of projects council members Farias, Yeager, and Holden are talking about, or is that going to be more of an in-house kind of job? What's the tipping point, as it were?
Lizette can discuss the threshold. I don't think that they are involved in anything that we just mentioned here.
Yeah, usually the component projects, so like if we're talking about just doing part of a building, so kitchens, floors, windows, that sort of thing is usually done in-house by the fire department. Our DDC projects tend to be when it's an entirely new building, a full construction from new.
Okay, well, I asked because if they were all DDC projects, I think we would know the quote unquote culprit, as I think Councilmember Yeager was alluding, because frequently when they're involved, it does really increase the cost of the project. And so I'm just wondering, like, when you do these inventories about, okay, this is going to cost X, Y, or Z, are you just looking at past examples, or like what is the actually kind of the drill down details for you to arrive at those figures?
Yeah, so the cost estimates that are provided are based on prior examples. So they're based on what our actual experience has been. And as I mentioned earlier, I mean, in a lot of cases, what seems like a relatively small component project grows to be a much larger project, given the age of our facilities, the potential for abatement, and the complicated phasing we must do to ensure that we're not disrupting the field. So all of those things contribute, but we're happy to have, you know, continued offline conversations to go into some of those details on why specific projects have come in at what seem to be relatively high prices.
All right, thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember. And next we'll turn to Councilmember Brewer.
Starting time.
Thank you very much. I'm sorry, I was on a long Zoom, so I tried to listen as much as I can. I have 2 questions, and I think the chair knows one of them. So certainly, and if this has been asked, you can say, Gail, forget it. So it's my experience, because of lack of inspectors, that it's hard to get a new building or a daycare center inspected. It takes months. So I'm wondering what the status is of hiring for those jobs. These are folks who have to say that this building is okay by the fire department. And I think what happened was during the pandemic, there wasn't a lot of building, and then all of the construction projects came due during a relatively short period of time. So I get it. But you have nothing but complaints from the building industry, the developers, the daycare centers, and so on, number one. Number two, just what I was hearing a few minutes ago. So I've been asked to, in 2 fire stations on the Upper West Side, pay for, I think it's a boiler. Whoa, I can't do the whole thing. It's a big, big price. So I will do some, but then what happens is there some other way that you don't want this money sitting around forever? How does that work in terms of the balance of that money? I can ask, you can ask the speaker, you can try different things, but I want to know from FDNY's perspective, if a council member puts in some, is there some hope for getting the project done? Thank you very much. Those are my 2 questions.
Sure. We did touch on the inspections earlier, but I'll go over it briefly if that's okay with you. So, we are, I think you and I have spoken about some of these locations, and we share that frustration. The administration has been incredibly supportive in helping us get to a place where our backlogs are resolved and we can do those inspections in a shorter turnaround time. There's basically, 3 parts of it. One is hiring. Right now we're under headcount, and a lot of those titles are really hard to recruit. And so the administration has really put us together in a working group with our other agencies to find ways to get people into those titles so we can lower those inspection times, and that's critical. The other piece is technology. We finally moved to an electronic system, and that is going to not only give transparency to the business owners for what they need to do and when, but will also help us find more efficient ways to conduct our business process. And then the last is customer service. We're putting resources into a customer service unit in the department. We've actually been out for Small Business Week, actually bringing our inspectors out to the small businesses to let them know, who's going to come inspect, what's going to happen when they inspect, to help get them ready, and to give them a resource for, where to reach out when they do feel like there's a delay impacting their business, or they're not sure what they need to cure in order to pass. So, SBS has been working hand in hand with us on that. So I do think you'll see a difference in the backlog over these, next few months.
Okay. And then just in terms of the boilers and the vast cost, and I put in some, but that, I don't know if it's going to help.
Yeah, Lizette.
Yeah, so we do have some lump sum funding for component renovations at our facilities. And any additional funds are helpful in trying to get to fully funding some of those projects. With the funding we have to prioritize. And so having additional elected official funds does help us get to more projects in a year than we would otherwise be able to. But we do have some existing lump sum funding that can be used to help fully fund projects.
Yeah. Thank you very much. I'm sorry to duplicate, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Councilmember Brewer. And before I turn it back to Chair Brannan, I just want to make sure we have all council members recognized for the record. Councilmember Barron, I see your hand. Just one moment, please. So for today's hearing, we got council members Brannan, Ariola, Osei, Yeager, Brooks Powers, Brewer, Farias, Moya, Velasquez, Holden, Carr, Schulman, Lewis, Barron, Sanchez, Ayala, Powers, Feliz, Riley, and Gennaro. And Councilmember Barron, per the chair, we can give you 2 minutes for a follow-up question.
I really appreciate the 2 minutes, Chair Brannan and Chair. I just wanted to mention also, Commissioner, that we do have a high school of fire science in East New York, and a lot of Blacks are graduating from there. Don't keep them on a waiting list. Don't deny them physical assessments. This is a way we can get more Blacks on the fire. We got 1 or 2 already in my district, but we have a whole high school there. And we got to deal with this racism. It's just been far too long. So I appreciate that. And thank you, Mr. Chair, for me just mentioning my high school of fire science. And they're graduating very successfully with high grades and high scores after they graduate on the fire test. Thank you.
I appreciate you bringing up the high school. It's an incredible organization, and exactly what you mentioned is true. It's an incredible source of Black diversity for the fire department, and they will not be, I can assure you that they will not be kept from the list in any way, shape, or form. I'd actually love to talk to you at some point about the expansion of the high school program, which I think is really effective.
I'll be glad to do that.
Okay.
Back to you, Chair Brandon. Sorry.
Thank you, Council. Okay, so we are going to make sure we get a follow-up letter sent for anything that the chair and I, the co-chair and I felt were not sufficiently answered today. I think, we want the council wants the FDNY to consider us partners, right? We want the FDNY to be as strong as they can be, and to have everything that they need. And we want to be partners with you in the fight for EMS pay parity, partners with you in getting that fifth man restored, the procurement reform and the capital issues that my colleagues mentioned, the diversity and recruitment. Certainly we're invested in how Be Heard is further rolled out across the city. And we want the council wants to be partners in all of these things, and we understand that a lot of these issues are precluded by collective bargaining, but we can't just shrug our shoulders and surrender to that. There's very important issues that need to be taken care of here that I think the majority of New Yorkers would support, certainly in terms of EMS pay parity. So we appreciate your time today. I thank all of my colleagues who joined us and my chair, Councilwoman Ariola.
Chair, I just asked for indulgence. I had three follow-up questions.
Sure, go ahead.
So I just want to make sure, and just to piggyback on what Chair Brannon is saying, we really do need to have the responses to the questions here sent in a timely fashion by the deadlines. And I'd especially like to see the information sent in writing to Deputy Speaker Ayala regarding the bariatric ambulances. One of the questions that I was very much interested in wasn't asked is, what's the current status of firehouse facility upgrades to accommodate female firefighters?
So every firehouse has facilities for female firefighters. And then in addition to that, which I think is important for the long term, we've put into our specifications for any facility renovations, specific specifications for female firefighter facilities, especially larger ones. In some cases, those can only be accommodated via a gut renovation of the house. So what we've done is had a short-term and a medium and a long-term plan. In the short term, there is a facility for every female firefighter. In the medium term, when a female firefighter is assigned somewhere, we actually go and operations does a personal walkthrough and makes sure that that facility has everything that that person would need. And we do some work if there's not everything they need there. And then in the long term, every time we renovate a firehouse, a female facility will be a part of that renovation.
Okay, great. And just the final follow-up is on the lithium battery fires, just in those areas, the 60 fires, like how many of those incidences with the fire were compliant with the regulations that have been passed?
That I don't have in front of me. I'd have to break down for you, but
okay.
Yeah, is it, which regulation are you specifically referencing? So we break it down correctly.
All right, wasn't it 22? Let's see.
So while you're looking, the two things that we generally look for when we're investigating these fires were they using a proper charger, the charger that came with the bike, and were they overloading an outlet, and then were they using the batteries that came with the bike, or are they using an aftermarket battery? So those are two things we look for because those are things that we can do education around.
So it was local law 47, and which is states exactly what you were saying. So I just would like it broken down with those 60 fires. How many of those residences and or commercial buildings that had a fire because of lithium batteries were compliant? And that's
we'll break it down for you.
Thank you.
And we just want to, Chair, to make sure we recognize Councilmember De La Rosa had joined us as well.
Thank you, Council. Thanks to all my colleagues. Thank you, Chair Ariola. Malcolm, thank you so much. Everyone that worked behind the scenes on this first executive budget hearing. Acting Commissioner Kavanaugh and the deputy chiefs that joined us today. We appreciate this partnership, and we will certainly be talking more as we head into further negotiations. And with that,